I did over 1000 fights to try and scientifically determine the strongest fighting type in Pokemon Fire Red Leaf Green, and today I'm going to be ranking all of them. We start at number 8 with the worst fighting type, which is Machop. Now, this is the second part of a series in which I rank every Pokemon in Fire Red Leaf Green. So, I've already explained the system which I use to rank them. But as a quick summary, using one Pokemon, I challenge every important trainer in two different ways. One where I fight in a 1v1 against every Pokemon on their team, and then one where I fight against their whole team, getting 1 point if the Pokemon manages to beat every 1v1, and another for a sweep. With that, the points get turned into a score that takes into account its contribution for a full playthrough, and the moment that you obtain that Pokemon. If you still have some questions, you can watch the Bug ranking video, as I go more in depth on the explanation, or you can read the Google Doc that's in the description. Now going into Machop, which can be obtained in Rock Tunnel after getting the HM for Cut, he was a bit tricky. This whole line has the ability Guts, which makes it so that if the Pokemon has a status condition like Poison or Paralysis, they get a 50% increase in attack. The reason why it was tricky was because of two things. One was that I don't think most people will go out of their way to get their Machop poisoned, especially since it takes like 10 minutes for that to happen. And two was that some of the trainers rely on status to get the upper hand, like Erika with Paralysis or Agatha with Sleep, so it gave them a Machop line what felt like an unfair advantage. However, I decided to just let the Pokemon with this ability to be allowed to be poisoned before a fight. I could have done that for the other Pokemon, but I think it's way more likely that someone is going to poison a Pokemon to get the Guts ability to trigger, rather than poisoning a Pokemon to prevent getting put to sleep. Anyway, with that second explanation out of the way, and going on to the positives, Machop has an incredible move pool. Rock Slide, Earthquake, and Return are great coverage moves that use his physical attack. Brick Break has a fighting stab move that does decent damage and has 100 accuracy. Cross Chop has a less accurate fighting move but that does more damage. A setup move in Bulk Up, which I might as well just say it now, but every fighting type learns this move via TM, and both Flamethrower and Fire Blast. I don't know why you will use them since Machop's special attack is less than half his physical attack, and it doesn't get the boost from using Guts, but it's there, I guess. Oh, and there's also Dynamic Punch and Focus Punch, with the first one doing the same damage as Cross Chop while also always confusing the target. The drawback is that it only has 50 accuracy, so it's not even worth it for the ranking as it's way too unreliable. The same goes for Focus Punch, as it needs a turn without getting hit for it to work. But with those moves and his incredible 80 base attack stats, he was able to win against more than half of the individual fights. Besides that, he also managed to get 3 sweeps. Those were against Lieutenant Surge, Giovanni on the Rocket Hideout, and Giovanni on Silphco. For those fights, I just spam my strongest move against them, using Brick Break against Lieutenant Surge, Low Kick against the first Giovanni fight since it's a move that does more damage based on weight, and his Pokemon are pretty heavy, and both Cross Chop and Dig against the second Giovanni fight. Now, going on to the negatives, the main issue of Machop is that he's so freaking slow. 35 speed is pathetic, even for a first form Pokemon. For context, Snorlax, which is a Pokemon known for being really strong but pretty slow, has a speed stat of 30. Combine this with the fact that his special defense isn't that great either, and that if he has to rely on Guts, his HP gets slowly lowered even with the leftovers, and you have a Pokemon that's not well suited for long battles, or ones against Psychic types, or ones against Flying types, or ones against special attacks. You know what, let's just move on. Speaking of weaknesses, and this is something that goes for every fighting type, but they really don't like the rival having a Alakazam. It's way too fast and hits really hard with Stab Psychic. Moving forward, I'm not going to mention it, but know that just by having that Pokemon, none of the fighting types were able to get a sweep against the champion fights. Finally, while not late, getting him on Rock Tunnel means that he misses on 8 different fights, which is a bit of a shame since he could have gotten a couple more points by fighting against the rival on Nugget Bridge and against Brock, but without that, he ends up with a score of 36.25, which is at least better than most first form bug types. Also, something that I should mention because I know people are going to ask about this, but Facade, which is a 70 base power normal move that doubles in power if the Pokemon has a status condition, is only available in the post game. I really wish I could have taught it to him, because the Machop line alongside the Rattata line are the only ones that could have used that move to its full potential. Guess I'll have to wait until Emerald. At number 7, and this is going to be a surprising one, but it is Machoke. I know there's one more first form Pokemon, but I'm going to explain later how this happened. As for his positives, Machoke decides to invest more into bulk, getting 10 HP, 20 defense, and 25 more special defense. He also got 20 more attack and a bit more speed and special attack, but the last two don't really matter much. Nothing else really changes since the move pool stayed the same upon evolution, but I guess this is a good time to explain how I'm going to evaluate the evolutions. So how it's going to work is that I'm going to take the performance of its pre-evolution until it's able to evolve. So for example, Machop evolves after Lieutenant Surge at level 28. So I'm going to take his performance for that fight, and then when he evolves into Machoke, I'm going to take his new results. Anyway, with the stat increase, he does a bit better against individual fights and gets 5 new sweeps. Those were against all the rival fights on Pokemon Tower, Koga with the help of Guts, and Giovanni as a gym leader. Unfortunately, he still has the same issues he had when he was a Machop, which are that he's still too slow, he's still weak to special moves, although way less now thanks to the boost to HP and special defense, and he's still available late. I know this is a really short spot, but there's not much to say since most of it was already said when I talk about Machop. So with all of this, Machoke gets a final score of 51.53, a bit over 15 points higher than Machop. For the number 6 spot, and once again, this was completely unexpected, this is going to be Mankey, which I guess makes him the strongest non-fully evolved fighting type. Now funny enough, Mankey and Machop have the same base stat total of 305 and the same attack of 80. The difference is that while Machop is slow and bulky, Mankey is fast and frail with a base 70 speed. This makes a huge difference in his performance, as seen in the spot that he took, especially since their move pool is pretty similar, with Machop having Foresight to hit ghost types with fighting moves and both Flamethrower and Fire Blast, and Mankey having Aerial Ace and both Thunderbolt and Thunder. And while the electric moves are as useless on Mankey as the fire moves on Machop, Aerial Ace is massive, as he's able to hit grass and fighting types for super effective damage. There's also the fact that he's obtained on Route 22 on the left of Viridian City, making him one of the very few Pokemon that's available for every fight in the game. With this, Mankey gets more victories on the individual fights, although most of them were from the early game, and got 10 sweeps. Those were against Brock, all of the rival fights on Nugget Bridge, the Charmander and Squirtle rival on Pokemon Tower, Giovanni on the Rocket Hideout, Giovanni on Silphco, Lane, and Giovanni as a gym leader. Now the problem with Mankey is that he relies way too much on being faster and hitting hard, which causes a couple of issues. The first is that he doesn't get many chances of setting up bulk up, because even if he raises his defense, it doesn't eliminate the issue of being frail. The second issue is the late game. Many of the Pokemon are either faster, bulkier, or both, meaning that Mankey can only take like 1, maybe 2 hits before fainting. And third are Intimidate users, which I don't think I need to go in depth about why that's an issue. If he had gotten Guts instead of Machop, I have no doubt that Mankey would have performed better than some fully evolved Pokemon. Instead, he has to settle with being the best non-fully evolved fighting type with a score of 53.28, which is still a pretty good score and a bit under 2 points higher than Machoke. Anyways, at number 5, this is going to be Poliwrath, the worst fully evolved fighting type, and I think the first Pokemon that you can realistically use from this list. Now, Poliwrath has some interesting stats, because unlike the fighting types that specialize on attack alongside another stat, he decides to have a more defensive approach. having a similar attack to the first forms but being way bulkier than both of their final evolutions. He's also unique in the fact that he can actually make use of special attacks thanks to his decent special attacking stat and his water typing, which, funny enough, makes him the only fighting type to have a secondary typing in this game. It also gives him access to some coverage moves that no other fighting type has, like Surf, Ice Beam, and Psychic. Now, like the other fighting types, he does get Bulk Up to boost his stats, but he's also the only Pokemon line alongside Snorlax to get the move Belly Drum, a move that maxes out your attack by sacrificing half your max HP. With all of this, he surprisingly only loses in 3 of the individual fights he's available for, those fights being against the rivals Venusaur on Silph, against Sabrina's Alakazam, and against the rivals Alakazam on the champion fight. As for the sweeps, he defeats Koga, all of the rival fights on Silph, Giovanni on Silph, Sabrina, Blaine, Giovanni as a gym leader, Lorelei, and Bruno. Now, I've praised Poliwrath a lot, but the reality is, he's not that great. Let's go in parts. The first is that he's available incredibly late, only after obtaining the Pokeflute. That's because you need the Super Rod to obtain Poliwag. What this means is that Poliwrath misses on 13 different fights, which is a problem that most water types have, either requiring Surf, the Good Rod, or the Super Rod, with the first one being after Koga and the last 2 requiring the Pokeflute, which is after the first Giovanni fight. The second issue is that while he did get a lot of good special moves, he misses on 2 physical attacking moves that the previous Pokemon had, Cross Chop and Rock Slide, instead having to rely on Brick Break and Ice Beam. And third is that while his stats are distributed so that he's bulky with decent speed and attacking stats, that's the issue, they're just decent. Because of that, a lot of Pokemon require 2 hits or more to be defeated, which slowly drains Poliwrath's HP throughout a fight, something that happened a lot. The boosting moves help, but he needs to set up more than one bulk up for it to make a difference. And even though I said great things about Belly Drum, I think it only helped him win 2 fights. Having to pay half of Poliwrath's max HP is just too expensive, and most opponents don't really give you the chance to recover or even use the move, which is a shame since among the Belly Drum's users in Gen 3, Linoone is a fast but frail Pokemon with stab return, and both Snorlax and Hariyama are slow but bulky Pokemon with an already great attack stat. Meanwhile, Poliwrath is in the middle, being good but not great at anything. I think he would have been better if he invested a bit more stats on speed or went for either being a physical or a special attacker instead of both. But with that, he gets a final score of 58.82. At number 4, this is going to be Hitmonchan, a Pokemon with really good attack and both a respectable bulk and speed. Hitmonchan has an interesting coverage, as it has access to the usual moves for the fighting types of Rock Slide, Brick Break, Earthquake, and Bulk Up, but he adds Sky Uppercut, a move that sacrifices some accuracy to be a bit stronger than Brick Break, Mach Punch, a fighting type priority move, and all 3 elemental punches, which would be amazing coverage and could potentially make him a mid attacker, but spoiler, he doesn't use any of the last 3 moves. Both Sky Uppercut and Mach Punch are interesting in the fact that Hitmonchan is the only Pokemon in this game that gets these moves, with the first one giving him some extra damage and the second one allowing him to finish off opponents that outspent Hitmonchan and lived on a sliver. With these tools, he manages to sweep every fight from the moment he's available, with the exception of Agatha and all of the rival champion fights. He also only struggled with a few individual Pokemon. Those were Lance's Aerodactyl and Dragonite, and the rivals Alakazam and Blastoise from his champion team, with the addition of his Arcanine from his Venusaur team, which, if you didn't know, is a higher level than the one on his Blastoise team. Now, let's get into why he's only number 4. The main reason is when you obtain him. You can technically get him after Lieutenant Surge, since you can easily get the tea, give it to the guards, and head to the dojo, but there's an issue in that. The Karate Master has Pokemon that are level 37, so you have no chance of beating him with a level cap of 29. So you could do it after Erika, but I would also say that's unrealistic, since you would have to train all of your Pokemon by defeating the trainers on the new routes and then head back to Saffron only to get a Pokemon that's level 25. That's why I decided to make the Hitmons available only after defeating Koga, matching with how the game was intended to be played. If you think he should be obtainable before Koga, it doesn't make that much of a difference in the final score, since both Hitmonchan and Hitmonlee are able to defeat all of Koga's Pokemon individually but are not able to get a sweep, and this actually makes their score lower. Another thing is both his HP and special attack stats. Like, dear god, how are you going to give a Pokemon 50 HP when he's supposed to be the bulky one? And 35 special attack when you give him all of the elemental punches? Like, Thunder Punch barely does more damage than Rock Slide against Gyarados. At -1 attack. I understand that giving him those moves makes sense since his whole thing is punching, but it's just so frustrating. I would have loved it if they gave him like 30 more special attack, maybe at the cost of his special defense. Or what if he was available earlier? Like, you get all of the evolution stones before Erika, so maybe then? But as it stands, Hitmonchan gets a final score of 64.78. Number 3 is going to go to Machamp. Look, I've already explained both Machop and Machoke, and this one is just a stronger version. Nothing much changes. I will clarify though that I decided to make trade evolutions immediately available, so no waiting till like level 36. It may seem unfair, but by the point that most of them are going to evolve, stone evolutions are at your disposal. So I don't think it's that crazy. Except for Alakazam, that one is going to destroy the early game. One fun detail that I'll mention to not make this section last like 10 seconds is that Machamp's Focus Punch boosted by Guts is the strongest move in Fire Red Leaf Green, not counting moves like Explosion or Max Power Rollout. It's not the strongest move in Gen 3 though, as I would go to Kyogre's Max HP Water Spout boosted by the rain. It's also not the strongest physical attack, as I would go to Slacking's Max Power Flail, which is a move that I'm going to talk about later. Anyways, for stats, he gets 10 points to HP, defense, and speed, 15 points to special attack, 25 points to special defense, and 30 points to attack, bringing his attack to an astounding 130, one of the highest in the game, only behind Dragonite's 134. He also now gets a few more individual victories and 5 new sweeps, those being against Erika, the Rivals Charmander and Squirtle team on Silph Co, Lane, and the Rivals Squirtle team before the league. Now the issue with Machamp is that he still doesn't do that well against full teams thanks to his poor speed. The bulk helps, but for example against the Elite Four, he didn't get a single sweep. I'm not saying that he's bad since the only individual fight he lost was against the Rivals Blastoise on his champion team, but he's just not suited for long battles, which in the end got him 67.14 points, a bit over 15 points higher than Machoke. For the number 2 spot, this is going to be Hitmonlee. Now, he's extremely similar to Hitmonchan. They only have a few differences, those being that Hitmonlee sacrifices defense to increase his attack and speed, and a couple of moves. While Hitmonchan gets Sky Uppercut and Mach Punch, Hitmonlee gets High Jump Kick and Reversal, with High Jump Kick having the same damage and accuracy as Sky Uppercut, but with the drawback that if you fail, you take recoil damage. Wait. Why would you give them the same base power only to have one of them have no drawback and the other potentially KOing you? Whatever. The other move, Reversal, is a move that increases in power the lower your HP is at, going all the way to 200 base power if Hitmonlee's HP is lower than 4.2%. This is actually what I was talking about when I mentioned Slacking's Flail, as both of these moves increase in power the lower is your HP. Another fun fact about Hitmonlee is that he's one of only 5 Pokemon lines in this game with one of these moves, those Pokemon being Krabby, Poltin, and Magikarp with Flail, and both Hitmonlee and Kangaskhan with Reversal. Anyway, with all of this, Hitmonlee couldn't beat only 8 different fights. Those were against Agatha's Ace Gengar, Lance's Dragonite, all of the Rivals champion fights, and the Rivals Alakazam as a champion as well, with the last 2 counting as 6 different fights because of being different teams. It's also worth mentioning that thanks to Reversal, he managed to beat Bruno's Machamp and Lance's Aerodactyl while having the Black Belt equipped. Comparing him to Hitmonchan, he doesn't do that much better, only getting 2 more individual fights and 1 more sweep. But with how few fights there are thanks to getting him after Koga, it makes the point difference enough to surpass both Hitmonchan and Machamp, but not enough to get the number 1 spot. Which brings me to the negatives, which is once again the place where you get him. I've already said enough during the Hitmonchan section, so I'll just skip it and talk about the second negative point about Hitmonlee. And that's that his physical defense and HP are pathetic. He compensates by being fast and strong, but on the fights that he lost, you can see that it becomes an issue if not handled correctly. Speaking of not handling correctly, the strategy of using reversal is the definition of extremely high risk and high reward. Because yes, you get a 200 base power stab move, but you're also a single priority move away from getting KO'd. It would be nice if he got more HP, as it would also make his substitutes do better against certain matchups. But even with that, he gets a score of 67.78, which is exactly 3 points higher than Hitmonchan and, funny enough, less than a point higher than Machamp. And coming in at number 1, this is going to be Primeape. Primeape is like Hitmonlee if you got him earlier. He has a bit more physical defense but less special defense. His attack is lower but his speed is a bit higher. He doesn't have reversal but instead uses cross chop and low kick, which are stronger than high jump kick. And the most important difference, which I've already mentioned, is that he's available extremely early compared to Hitmonlee, evolving right after Lieutenant Surge at level 28. Actually, I just noticed that the Hitmonlee and Primeape have the same base stat total. Huh. All of these stats, combined with the fact that you can get a Mankey right at the beginning of the game, make him an excellent Pokemon throughout the whole game. Only struggling in the early game as a Mankey against some full teams, Koga's full team, and a few matchups against the Elite Four. As for the negatives, it's weird, but there's not much. Like, he struggles as a Mankey on the early game as I've mentioned, but there's not much to do about that. And as a Primeape, he only wants a bit more attack and speed. The main opponents that he struggles against are fast or bulky flying types with a strong flying move, and fast or bulky psychic types with a strong psychic move. And besides the previously mentioned stats, the other way I see how to solve this problem is to give him Shadow Ball for the psychic types, and a higher special attack that can make his Thunderbolts more usable than Rock Slide. Or maybe a bit more bulk so that he can set up Brain Dance and hit with 100 accuracy Thunders. But even then, he will still struggle a bit on the Elite Four. You could also give him the Dark typing, which I think fits him, but that only helps against psychic types and uses his special attack for offense. Or, you can just throw everything out the window and give him Guts like Machamp, because having a fast Pokemon with a decently high attack stat and strong stab moves definitely wouldn't break the game. Oh hey Swellow, but with that, Primeape ends up with a final score of exactly 80, making him the strongest fighting type of the game. Anyways, did I miss anything on the ranking? If you think so, let me know in the comments below. That's all I have for now. See ya!